afternoon, guys. Dave Canterbury with the Pathfinder School. What I want to do today is I want to talk to you about a couple of folding knives, and I want to show you a modification to a very good, inexpensive folding knife that will help improve your safety when operating with this knife. Stay with me, guys. Okay, I have two knives here on the table. This one is a reproduction of an 18th century, what was called a penny knife, and this one was made by my buddy Steve Critter Davis for me, and it's a replica of an 18th century pocket knife that was called the penny knife. It was often kept in shooting bags and things of that nature. And basically it's just a wooden handle with a slot in it that has a hand forged blade, and then it has a collar around the outside where the blade folds. It's pinned. So there's a pin that drives right through the blade, and that makes the blade fold in. And then that collar keeps it stabilized side to side from snapping the handle when you're carving with it or working with it. Now, starting in 1890, Opinel from France made a knife that looks very similar to this. And this is an Opinel number 10 high carbon steel. It is a very, very similar knife to the penny knife. It's almost an exact duplicate of that knife in its form and function. However, what they did with the Opinel is they put a sleeve that rotates side to side, just like this, and it can go left or right. And what that does is it locks that blade from shutting on you. That's a great safety feature of that knife. The Opinel number 10 in high carbon is a very, very good bushcraft backup blade for your pocket, your shooting bag, your haversack, whatever the case may be. It has a really, really nice ground Scandinavian type edge on it. It's a full Scandi grind all the way to the top. It says Opinel France right on it. This is a number 10, like I said, in high carbon steel. I like my blades to be high carbon steel. I like them to be high carbon steel so that they are multifunctional. I also like them to have a 90-degree spine on them to be multifunctional. And I'll show you what that does with this knife. And then we're going to talk about one more modification to this knife to make it an even better knife than it already is for a price tag of about $16.95 on most places on the internet. All right, there are two things that I really want my knife to be able to accomplish besides being a good cutting tool. The first one is I want that knife to be good for striking a ferrocerium rod. For that to happen, it has to have a good 90-degree spine, and the heat treat has to make that metal hard enough that it will scrape shavings from this ferrocerium rod. And there are knives out there that are high carbon steel that still, even though they have a 90-degree spine, will not scrape a ferrocerium rod because of the heat treat. So I want them to be very good at that. And you can see once we get the coating wore off of that rod or the oxidization, that thing is just throwing tons and tons of sparks. And that's exactly what I want. The second thing that I expect from my knife is I expect it to act in the same manner as a flint and steel. And that high carbon blade is what gives me that ability. As long as I've got a good solid heat treat and the back of this blade's very hard, I can hit this with a hard rock like flint, chert, quartz, things like that, and it will throw sparks just like a flint and steel fire steel. So I've got a nice belt pouch here that's made by Justin Wolf. I just received this in the mail. Stuck a char tin in it, and it's got 4 nice rivets on the back for your belt. You can slide in sideways this way if you wanted to, or this way, it doesn't matter. And you just pull on this loop, and that allows this to come open, and it unfolds 3 ways like this. Holds an Altoids tin just perfect, so it holds a nice little fire kit in there just right. And in this tin I've got my flint, my steel, and some charred material here, lamp wick, charred lamp wick material, okay? So I don't need to carry this if this will do the same job. Pretty sure you guys can see that burning. Okay. So we have the ability with this now to start fire in two different ways, as well as being a good cutting tool. The only problem that I have with this tool is that as it gets old, and this one's a couple of years old, the blade becomes a little bit loose in the handle. And that's okay when it's open because you're locking it off. But there's no lock off when it's in the closed position. And I'm afraid if I put this thing in my pocket and bounce it around, you can see that blade fell out. Now if it's sitting like this in my pocket, when I go to reach into my pocket to get it, or it's sitting like this and starts to open up and slices through my leg, I got a big problem. I'm going to show you a very simple fix to that to make it so this thing will not open in your pocket without having to wrap something around the blade and all that messing around. We're going to make a safety device out of the current safety device that's already on there. Okay, the safety device that's on this tool is basically just a piece of spring steel that is slipped right over the top of the single ring that's holding the blade in. So if we get underneath that with a screwdriver and just push it sideways a little at a time, kind of like that, it'll pop right over the top of that rivet right there that's holding the blade in. So now this knife is exactly like this knife as far as that goes. These two knives are now pretty much the same thing. They're both a penny knife. Don't worry about that ferrocerium rod stuff on your blade because it'll come right off. So what we want to do with this is we want to make this a locking device in both directions. And to do that, what we're going to have to do is, when this blade is closed on here, I'm going to show you this real quick. I'm going to pop this back on here. You can't turn this. What we're going to do is we're going to cut a small channel out of here so that we can turn it sideways, and it will put a shoulder in there that's going to lock this blade down so that it can't open unless we move it out of the way. Just like when we lock it open, this won't close until we move it out of the way. We're going to do exactly the same thing so that we can keep it closed when we want to. So again, I'm just going to slip a screwdriver underneath there like this and move it sideways. Just like that. And we're just going to cut a notch in here with our grinder. Now the exact same thing that I'm going to do right now could be done with a file. I'm going to find a good edge over here, and I just want to cut a real small shoulder in here. So I'm going to find a good cutting edge here. And just cut a real small shoulder in here. You see what I've done there? I just cut a real small shoulder in right there. Just like that. And again, I could do that with a file probably. But this will work just as well. Now you can see all I've done is cut a little hook in there that's going to hook around that blade. That's all I'm going to need. Now when I snap this back on my tool, just like this, as long as I made that hook deep enough, which I did, you can see now that it rotates right over the top of that. I'm going to zoom this in just a little bit. Okay. So you can see right there's our hook, and that's going to keep this knife from coming open in my pocket. Now the blade doesn't move. The most it can move is to right there, as long as I've got that locked over. So now I can lock it this way, I can lock it this way, and when I shut it, I can lock it this way so that the blade cannot come open. No matter how much wears on this knife and how floppy this blade gets, it's now not going to open in my pocket and be a danger to me. And that takes just a few seconds to make that modification, but it makes all the difference in the world in your safety carrying this knife. All right, folks, well, I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I appreciate you joining me out here today for this short video, a little history lesson about these folding type penny knives. Talk about the Opinel and a quick lesson on how to make a safety device to keep the knife closed while it's in your pocket, haversack, or belt pouch. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for me, for our school, for our family, for our business, for all my affiliates, sponsors, and friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.